have Alzheimer's or another form of dementia, and Hispanic Americans are about 1.5 times as likely. Reasons for this are not completely understood. There's a lot of research going into this to better understand. There seems to be some consensus that some of that may be related to higher rates of vascular disease, but lots of work by people a lot smarter than me still needs to be done. And that's where we'll talk about just in a minute about the importance of clinical trials, especially with minority and higher risk populations. Unfortunately for us women, we are also at higher risk. So about 2/3 of the people living with Alzheimer's are women. So, that's again something that it needs to be better understood. I mean, we understand that women do tend to live a little bit longer than men, but that wouldn't explain such a big difference. So scientists are looking into maybe what biological differences or maybe life cycle differences that might be causing some of that. So when we think about Alzheimer's disease, you can think of it as a continuum. So it's kind of like a timeline. So the first stage, they're kind of demonstrated by these colors here. So the first stage is that blue stage. It's the asymptomatic stage. So scientists believe that the changes start happening in somebody's brain over a decade before you might start to show signs of dementia. So that's when, that's going to be your asymptomatic change or stage where some of those changes are starting to happen, but we're not really seeing any symptoms in anybody yet. The next stage is called mild cognitive impairment due to Alzheimer's disease. So what that means is this person's you're starting to see changes in a person's memory or thinking. At this point, they're still, functioning very well. They don't really it might just be certain functions that are affected, and it's not necessarily interfering in that person's daily life at this point. Dementia due to Alzheimer's disease are really once we get to this purple stage, it's going to look pretty similar for any kind of dementia. The first stage is that mild stage, or the early stage, some people call it. And this is where you're probably starting to see symptoms. Sometimes people notice it in that mild cognitive impairment stage, but usually by the time the person gets to this early stage of dementia, people are really starting to notice that something's not right. So that's where you're starting to see changes that are starting to interfere. Maybe they're forgetting things more often. Maybe they are, getting lost, having trouble keeping up with their monthly bills, things like that. The moderate stage or the middle stage is where those things are going to start to become more pronounced. Alzheimer's is one of those weird things, and really any form of dementia, where it's kind of hard to pin somebody in any specific stage of the disease because it's not always obvious. Sometimes somebody might have a really good day, but then the next day they might have a really bad day. And so you might think they're, in a different stage. So people kind of float around a little bit, especially in these first two stages. Some of those behaviors that you hear about, those tend to kind of start to show up more in that moderate stage or that middle stage. So things like the agitation and aggression, wandering, that's kind of where some of that stuff, you'll usually start to see some of that. And then in the severe stage or late stage of the disease, this is where that person's going to be very impaired. At this point, they're going to probably need round-the-clock care. They're going to be able to do very little for themselves. Some people may not be able to speak or walk anymore, maybe even have difficulty swallowing. So this is really where all of their bodily functions and their communication is affected. Any questions about that? So until the last 3 years, there was no medications that were available that could actually slow the progression of the disease. In 2021, the first one was approved, and then last year another one was approved. Two treatments that actually attack the underlying biology of the disease. They actually have found to clear those plaques and tangles, so it slows the progression of the disease. They are not a cure. But it makes us really hopeful about what's to come because we're making progress every single time a new treatment becomes available. So this could potentially extend somebody's good quality time, a year, 2 years, which is really impactful to that person and to a family. And especially as more and more treatments are becoming available, very quickly at this point. At this point, there is no cure. There are medications that can help treat the symptoms, and so it's important to just be working with your doctor to kind of understand what works best for that individual. Those 2 treatments that I mentioned, those do have to be started in the very early stages of the disease for them to be effective, and that's where the early detection and diagnosis becomes even more important. Sorry, now that we are in this kind of era of treatment where there's actually something that can be helpful. And I just want to touch on this. On our website, there is something called Trial Match. And so they're always looking for both healthy volunteers, people who have it in their families, people who don't have it in their families, people who are living with the disease. It's really important to have a wide and diverse swath of participants in clinical trials so that we can better understand how all the different factors that affect us across all of our different communities impact our risk and also impact our receptiveness to treatments as well. And so if you have an interest in participating in clinical trials, there's lots of information on our website. So any questions about the disease itself before I jump into the warning signs? You guys are easy. I bet you're not always this quiet. So the Alzheimer's Association has compiled a list of 10 warning signs of Alzheimer's disease, and these are going to be pretty similar across all the different types of dementia. Different types of dementia might be more likely to manifest some signs earlier than others. So it's really going to vary by individual. I've heard people say that if you've met one person with dementia, you've met one person with dementia, because everybody's symptoms and everybody's progression throughout the disease is really going to look very different. Just to give you an idea, from time of diagnosis until death, the average is about 4 to 8 years, but there's people that live as long as 20 years with the disease. I'm sure you guys have met, families who have dealt with this for many, many years. So again, it's one of those things where it's really hard to predict what it's going to look like for any one individual. So when we're talking about the warning signs, memory loss that disrupts daily life, I forget things all the time, but usually I can come up with it later. Somebody who is showing signs of dementia is going to be forgetting things more often. They are also probably not as likely to be able to come up with it later. And it's really going to start to interfere in that person's daily life. Challenges in planning or solving problems, an example of what you might see here, maybe somebody who's always been really good about managing their finances is starting to miss their bills. Maybe their family's noticing that, that's happening more and more. They're seeing, mail around the house that's not being opened. This could be, as simple as, creating a grocery list, because that's kind of a multi-step process. Maybe having to come up with all the different pieces and parts involved in that might become more difficult. Difficulty completing familiar tasks. This might look like, driving to a familiar location and forgetting how to get home. This was actually a sign that we saw in my dad when he came for my son's graduation back in 2019. He's always been the person that took pictures at all of our family events, and he forgot how to use his camera. And he tried to brush it off, that it was just he hadn't used that one in a while. But for us, especially knowing the family history, we were a little concerned at that point. And then COVID happened. Confusion with time or place. Somebody might not understand where they are or how they got there. That's not uncommon. Trouble understanding visual images and spatial relationships, so maybe trouble with judging color and contrast, judging distance. They might even go to the eye doctor thinking that there's something wrong with their eyes, and the doctor's like, nope, your eyes are fine. It's just the way their brain is processing the information isn't quite right, but this can cause issues with things like driving, obviously. New problems with words in speaking or writing, so this might be, somebody who is maybe starting to use more descriptive terms to describe something. So maybe instead of pen, that thing you write with, because they can't come up with the word, but they know what it's for. Maybe if they're having trouble with reading or with writing. Misplacing things and losing the ability to retrace your steps. So the retracing your steps is the big thing there. We all lose things. I lose it all the time. But I can usually retrace my steps and figure out where I left something. Or if I happen upon it, I remember why I put it there, or I remember what was happening that made me put it there. Somebody with dementia is not going to be able to do that. They might think that people are stealing from them or moving stuff. They might put stuff in weird places, like keys in the refrigerator or something weird like that. Decreased or poor judgment. This could be another financial thing, like maybe they're making poor financial decisions and they've always been really good with it. Maybe it has to do with their hygiene. Maybe they are, not taking good care of their hygiene and they've always been really particular about that. Maybe they're wearing clothing that's inappropriate for the season. Things like that might be indications that something's not right. You might also start to notice somebody withdrawing from work or social activities, especially things that they used to enjoy, just because it's getting harder for them to process and figure and understand what's going on in those situations, so they're more likely to pull back. And the last one is changes in mood or personality. So this would be, sometimes they might have additional anxiety that they've never had before. They might fly off the handle more easily, just things that are kind of outside of their normal. And really what we're looking for with all of these is something that's outside of that person's normal level of functioning. If somebody's always been bad with their money, that's not a sign for them, right? If they're getting worse with it, maybe, but that probably wouldn't be the first obvious thing that you'd be looking for. You're looking for some things that are outside of that person's normal level of functioning. And when it comes to the signs, it's not where if you have 5 signs you need to go see the doctor. If you have 1 sign, you should go see the doctor because again, it could be Alzheimer's or dementia, but it could also be something else. And so there are things that are treatable, like even as something as simple as an undiagnosed UTI can cause dementia-like symptoms. Vitamin deficiencies, uncontrolled thyroid conditions, things like that can actually cause dementia-like symptoms. Friends and family are often the first to notice changes. Somebody who's dealing with dementia is probably not keeping track over time. And so if you were to approach them about it, they probably will be like, well, I'm not forgetting things, because in their mind they're not. They're more likely to notice changes that are related to things that they used to be able to do easily, things that are now harder for them to do. But usually they're not going to notice that they're forgetting things more often. And it's also really common for people to try to mask their symptoms or to deny that there's anything going on. So I just want to go through real quick some steps that are helpful to approach somebody who might be experiencing changes in memory or thinking. Because it is a really difficult conversation to have, and if you can kind of prepare in advance, it helps a little bit just to make it a little bit easier and less stressful for everybody. So the thing you want to think about first is what changes in the person's memory, thinking, or behavior do you see? So what is that person doing or not doing that's causing you that concern? What else is going on? Lots of things can cause dementia-like symptoms. That's where I was talking about some of the things uncontrolled or undiagnosed different medical or deficiency conditions. Things like depression. Have they recently moved? Have they lost a loved one recently? Are there things that are happening in that person's life that might be contributing to these symptoms? We'll learn about the signs and benefits of early diagnosis, which we're doing right now. Talk to others that care about that person. Is anyone else noticing these changes that you're noticing? And then you want to prepare to have the conversation. So when you're thinking about having this conversation, think about who should be the one to have that conversation with the person. An intervention approach where you have a whole bunch of people sitting in a room is probably not the best approach for something like this. It's usually best if that is an individual that person trusts and is very comfortable with. Usually 1 or 2 people, a lot of times that's going to be a family member. What's the best time and place to have the conversation? This seems kind of simple, but if there's a certain time of day that person doesn't do as well, that's probably not the best time to have that conversation. Having, the conversation over Christmas dinner, probably not the best time to have that conversation. There's too much going on, there's too many people around. So just thinking about what would be most appropriate for that person when you and that person are going to be most comfortable. What were you or the person having the conversation say? This seems kind of silly again, but almost like putting together a script, kind of thinking through what you want to say, having specific examples that you can talk to are probably going to be most helpful. Thinking about the words that you're choosing. So, you're showing signs of Alzheimer's, we need to go see the doctor, is probably going to put that person on defense. Saying things like, hey, I've noticed that you're forgetting things more often, or hey, you've had some recent, near misses in the car and I'm a little bit concerned about. Have you noticed that too? There's lots of things that could be causing this. So really finding a softer way to say these things and kind of preparing for, possible resistance as well. Offer to go with the person to the doctor. Again, hey, there's lots of things that could be causing this. Let's go see the doctor and see if they can help us figure it out. It's really helpful when somebody's showing signs of dementia to have somebody go to the doctor with them, to be able to help talk to the doctor about what their concerns are, but also to be able to take in the information that the doctor is telling them. Because a lot of times if they are dealing with dementia, they're not going to remember that. If needed, have multiple conversations. Again, this is not an easy conversation to have. So, somebody may be resistant to it the first time, but don't give up. Maybe try to understand what their fears are or what's causing that resistance and try to address some of that first and then come back to it later. But, don't give up just because that person is resistant. And then reach out for support. So I'll go over some resources that are available through the association here in just a minute. But there's lots of resources available. And then the next thing is to see a doctor. So some of the doctors that you might be referred to, usually we would tell people to go see their primary care physician first because we want to rule out anything else that might be causing this. And if somebody is over 65 and on Medicare, every year when you go for your annual wellness Medicare exams, and if you're not doing that, you should because it's free. So those annual Medicare wellness visits, they should be doing at least a basic cognitive test every year because they're looking for changes over time. But that would be, just making sure that you're going to see your primary care physician. But you might be referred to a geriatrician. Likely around here, it's going to be a neurologist or a neuropsychologist, maybe even a neuropsychiatrist, depending on what system you're in. But those are some of the specialists that you might be referred to. So some of the things that you might go through as part of the diagnostic process, again, recommending that you go to primary care physician first to kind of have those conversations. So they'll do like your medical history, physical exam. They'll probably do some lab tests, so like blood work, urine tests, make sure there's no UTI going on there, depression screening. So those are all things that might be done at your primary care doctor. Probably some mental cognitive tests as well. If they're seeing signs that are concerning to them, they might refer you for additional testing to a specialist. So that might include things like MRIs, PET scans. If you're looking for a very definitive diagnosis of Alzheimer's, once they kind of get that far, there's also a spinal tap involved in that. So where they look at the spinal fluid for specific markers that are only found in Alzheimer's disease. So those are things that might be part of the diagnostic process. And with the new technologies that are available, doctors can really come up with a pretty definitive diagnosis in most cases of what kind of dementia is, but even if not, certainly that it is dementia. And then, just from a perspective of research and treatments and early detection, we're really heading into some new exciting times even with diagnostics, because right now it's really hard to get some of those tests that might be needed to definitively diagnose. And especially with Alzheimer's, because those two new treatments are available only for Alzheimer's disease, because is related to those plaques and tangles. Having that early diagnosis becomes more important, but not everybody has access to a PET scan. But we hope in the next year to 2 years that there will be a finger prick blood test available that will show those proteins that are markers of Alzheimer's disease. So you'd be able to get that in just a primary care doctor's office. So it's pretty amazing stuff. And so just lastly, I just wanted to touch on resources that are available through the association. We do have a 24/7 helpline. I am also happy to be a resource, and I can meet with families in the community But I work normal business hours. Challenges, questions, crises don't come up always during business hours. So we do have people available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. These are all trained staff members, and we do have social workers on staff as well for more complex or crisis situations. Tons of information on our website. And then we also have a variety of programs here in our communities. We do have a support group for caregivers here in Mansfield. It meets once a month at the Area Agency on Aging, and I'm happy to provide that information if anybody might need something like that or know somebody who would benefit from that. But again, I'm also happy to meet with a family to help them through whatever specific issue they might be dealing with. We find a lot of times they get a diagnosis. They're either overwhelmed with too much information or they're like, here's your diagnosis, good luck. So we can kind of help them navigate kind of, what their logical next steps should be, any questions they have about the disease, things like that. Any questions? I don't know a lot about it, but it is a question that's come up several times recently. There are some studies that have shown an increased risk of Alzheimer's disease from aluminum products, including deodorants with aluminum. Of course, I'll be the first to admit that I use those because the other ones don't work. I don't like sweating. I just don't. But yeah, there is some link. I think it's not necessarily super conclusive as to like how much it is. I think that there's a lot of research going on to better understand a lot of the environmental factors that might be contributing to such large numbers of people being diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease. Because when we think about all the chemicals in the food that we eat, the air we breathe, the water we're drinking, it's increasing our risk, for a variety of different types of cancers. The reality is it's affecting our brains too. In addition to that, long-term sustained stress is not good for our brains either. So, those are all things, those environmental factors that are affecting our risk. I did bring some sheets here. This is 10 healthy habits for your brain. So these are things that scientifically have been shown to help reduce our risk of Alzheimer's or other forms of dementia. So all the things that are good for your heart, they're also good for your brain because the heart and brain are connected. So, every time your heart beats, about 20 to 25% of all the blood and oxygen from your heartbeat goes to your brain. So that's a pretty significant amount. So it makes sense. Diabetes can put you at higher risk. So making sure that your diabetes is well managed is really important. Sleep is also a big factor when it comes to, helping to keep our brains healthy. And then, exercise, diet, all of that stuff. So, that's not always easy for everybody, but whatever movement you can add into your day is really beneficial, as well as, adding things like fruits and vegetables, in whatever format works best for you. That's why you have somebody amazing like Beverly who can help you learn all that kind of fun stuff.
There's always a question of, the Alzheimer's diet. There really isn't one. They're just encouraging normal, healthy.
Right, so they say there's some evidence that shows that the aspects of the Mediterranean diet can be helpful. So the healthy fats, lots of fruits and vegetables, decreased amounts of processed foods or ultra processed foods, whole grains, fish, those, reducing our sugar, like those things are shown to be protective of our brain. So even if somebody has a diagnosis, those things can help slow the progression as well exercise does too. So if you know somebody who's got dementia, getting them out and moving can be really helpful to slow the progression, as well as, socialization and brain engagement. All of those things can be really helpful to slow the progression as well as reduce our risk. Anything else I can answer for you?
Do you find that most of the Alzheimer's patients' personalities are the same? My mother was very feisty.
sorry. So the question was about menopause and dementia. So I don't think that I have been reading some things recently about the estrogen, the loss of estrogen can actually be something that's contributing to a woman's increased risk of dementia, and that's where I think there's starting to be a sea of change as far as opinions on hormone replacement therapy and the benefits of it. I don't know completely if I don't think it's necessarily a cause for it, but I think it probably there are aspects of it that might be contributing to an increased risk. But I am not going to scientifically say that because I don't know that. Of course, you know, I'm at that weird stage where I am wondering, is it dementia or is it menopause? But that might be TMI for Facebook, sorry. Because sometimes the symptoms can look really similar. So anyway, sorry. No, my face red. Anything else I can answer? Go ahead.
You had mentioned talk about the Mediterranean diet.
Mhm.
And I agree that medicine is always so important, but sometimes I get worried about big pharma, right? Are there any type of supplements that you may suggest? Because you said heart and brain kind of match. So I know I've heard of things like, actually I've started taking the lion's mane, mushroom, reishi, any type of anti-inflammatory natural supplements that kind of help. Have you heard of any, or can you maybe suggest any that is good just to take?
So I am not a doctor, and I do not claim to be. I think there's a lot of question about supplements, especially because I think there's a lot of companies out there making these really grandiose claims, and there's no scientific backing for it. I think there's probably some benefit to some of them, especially when we're talking about inflammation. But the thing to recognize about the supplements is that they are not regulated and that they can't, and that they do, in spite of being natural, they can cause problems with other medications somebody might be taking. And so it's really important that if you're going to take supplements, that especially if you're taking other medications, that you talk to your doctor about those things, just to make sure that they're okay together. And I guess my feeling on supplements is that if it works for you and you feel better with it, then have at it. But if you're looking for something that's gonna, like, you know, cure Alzheimer's or keep you from getting it, there's probably not anything. But yeah, I mean, but definitely diet and exercise and taking care of your body. You know, what we put in our body it affects, you know, all aspects of our function. So that's a good question, though. I get that question a lot because there's like, especially like, you know, watching TV, there's like something called, what's the one? Yes, thank you. I hear about that one. I get asked about that one all the time. It's touted as this, like, you know, if you take this, you're not going to get dementia. Well, there's no scientific evidence. But again, if it doesn't interfere in something that you're taking and you feel like it's helping you be more, you know, with it, then have at it. You know, as long as your doctor knows that you're on it. I think I'm kind of one of those, you know, you got to do what works best for you people. Any other questions? I'm not sure.
Her mother talks about her deceased son. Her brother.
Yep.
Now she's talking about everyone. Every day that somebody new she's told us she's talking to.
So with dementia, especially as somebody kind of progresses further into the disease, it's sometimes hard to tell what period in time that person is actually in. It's not uncommon for people to think that they are in a different time frame than the current one. So she might think that she's a child sometimes. She might think that she is in her 20s. You know, it's not uncommon for somebody who has dementia to, you know, ask about loved ones that died many years ago. We say that the best thing that you can do is just to join them in their reality, because arguing with them and trying to tell them that that's not true or that that person died is not, it's not helpful. And they're not going to believe you. They're just going to try harder to convince you, and it's going to create an escalated situation.
He told me to tell her that he went to the store when she
Yep.
got to her.
Yep.
Because she said to me, why didn't you tell me he died? I didn't know what to say to her.
Yeah, and that's a tough one because people feel like they're lying to their loved ones. And I guess what we call it is a therapeutic fib. It's kind of, it's,
She said, it's not a lie, Darlene. You gotta tell her, but you gotta be where she is. And if she thinks her
right,
husband's alive,
right.
So now she's told me that. She's talking to everybody. She told me she was talking to her mom. I said, okay.
Yeah, and that's all you can do, because when you think about it, if you're telling somebody who really believes that they are in that time frame, that that person has died, every time you tell them that, they're going through that grieving process again because they don't remember it. And so it's just it just adds a lot more stress to that person. But if you can kind of push it off or do something like, oh, he's not going to be here today, or oh, he's out of town, or something, just something to kind of and then just redirect them. Just kind of, try to get them to move on to something else. Because you're not going to convince them that that's not true, but sometimes it's hard to tell where somebody is, like time-wise. And so it's not uncommon for somebody to think that they are a child, or that they're, in their 20s, or, when we know that that's not true. We can look at them and we know that, right? But they, in their mind, because that's what's happening with the brain. It's kind of crazy when you think about what the brain can do and all that it does to help us function. Anything else I can answer?
So I say, what you have for breakfast? Oh, a little bit of this, a little bit of that. I said, was it good? Because she couldn't tell me what she had, but she overcompensated.
Well, that long-term memory is the last thing to go, and a lot of times they can remember things from way, way back.
And
Uh,
singing.
yeah.
My mother loves to sing, so somehow, the memory about singing the words to a hymn, she can remember all that.
And she knows Bible verses. Oh, yeah. I mean, because I was laying in bed with her and I would play the Bible verses, and she sang the whole verse to me.
Yeah.
That just,
And especially there's a lot of benefit to music for people with dementia. It stimulates a different part of the brain. And I don't know if you've ever seen it. There's this video of this woman, and she was a ballerina dancer. She was many, many years ago. And she was nonverbal at this point. She was in a wheelchair, but they played the music from, I can't remember what it may have been Swan Lake or something, and she actually started going through the movements because she remembered that, and that actually moved her, and she responded to that even then when she couldn't speak. So I don't know, it's pretty, but yeah, music is really amazing.
We were in North Carolina in July of that year she passed. And this song by Brooke Benton and Dinah Washington came on, and she knew every word of that song. And she looked at my father while she was singing. And I was rejoicing. Because she couldn't tell me what she had for breakfast.
Yeah.
But she remembered that song from the 1950s.
Yeah.
Every lyric she sang to my father, and I was like, oh my God. She's back.
That's awesome.
have somebody who can hold the mic and maybe take it around and field questions? Speaking to it, it probably is. Click it on the bottom, so it's trying to just one time and then shoot it too.
Got it. Thank you. So thank you for having me. I am Maudie Murray. I am retired, registered nurse, retired nurse practitioner. Just about to go through orientation for the Alzheimer's volunteer program as a spokesperson. Yeah. Worked hospice for years. Was a hospice nurse practitioner, hospice nurse manager, hospice nurse, hospice educator. So, but I have a lot of family members who have gone through dementia of sorts, of types. And let's pray before I do. I'm also elder, local elder at Lee Memorial. It's ordained minister. And I'm a chaplain on call for Cleveland Clinic, Fairview, and Lutheran. Father God, in the name of Jesus, we thank you. We thank you for all the information we have heard here today. We thank you for our worship experience. We thank you for our speaker of the hour. We thank you for this church. We thank you for this pastor. We thank you for these members. We thank you for our traveling mercies. And I'm thanking you in advance for traveling mercies back home. So bless us as we continue to learn and understand and hear from you as we deal with those who are mentally impaired due to Alzheimer's or other types of dementia. In Jesus' name, amen. There's a song that says, open the heart, open my heart, open the eyes of my heart, but it also says that to open my mind so that I might hear you. And so it's very appropriate for people who are going through dementia to be able to hear you. And their reality is not our reality. And so I like what Jennifer said, is that we have to get into their reality, because that's the reality for them, even though it may not be life. It's what they're living. And so we have to be able to do that. I have a couple of cases. I went to a funeral, and we were almost done. He was my old pastor. And old meaning he had been my former pastor. He got to a point in the sermon, in the eulogy, and he started over. And everybody's looking at one another, but nobody's really saying anything. And so he began to do that eulogy all over again, and he was at the end. And I said, something's not right. He had no knowledge of it. Nobody, you couldn't stop him doing that because he was doing it. But his church took a blind eye to the fact that he was having some mental problems. And by the time they tried to address it, he was already probably in moderate stage dementia somewhere. And so then they had to try to scramble to get a pastor. He was a pastor who kept all the information to himself. So they still struggle as trying to figure out where things are, how to do this, how to do that. He did it all for the most part himself, or he had a select few, and and so they saw it coming, but nobody did anything to help, so that the church found themselves in dire straits because they ignored the signs. Annie calls 5 times a day, and each time is a new call. I haven't talked to you in a while. 5 minutes later, hey, I haven't talked to you in a while. 10 minutes later, hey, I was just thinking about you and I wanted to talk to you. I haven't talked to you in a while. Her reality. My reality is I've talked to you 5 times in the last hour. But I can't say that to her. It's good to hear from you again, is what I say. It's my sister. About 4 months ago, we got a call that she was missing. She lives in Hollywood, Florida. Well, now she's moved to Arcala because she's in a memory care unit. Somebody asked about when to move them. She's in a memory care unit now in Florida. She has 2 daughters, and neither of them were living with her. And as we began to see the signs, they put cameras in her house and had caregivers going in, not staying all day. She's lived in an assisted living facility. So so they thought that everything was okay, but I got a call that she was missing, and she was on TV missing down in Florida, and they didn't know where she was. And so we were, they was putting out the flyers and all. And so a lady in her building happened to see the information and contacted them to say, oh, I saw the security guard letting her in the room, whatever room he let her in. And she had told him that she had locked her key in her apartment and she needed to get in. He was a new security guard at the building. He let her into this apartment, which was not her apartment. She was in there rambling around. She, I think, was in their clothes. These people happened to be out of town, this lady. So she was in this other people's apartment. And there, she goes, I need to go up to trying to cook stuff and sat in their bed sleeping. But this lady knew that was not her apartment, but she didn't say anything until she saw that she was missing. And she knew that the guard had let her into that apartment. So she said, well, I did see her, and the last time I saw her, he let her in, and sure enough, she was in there. When the people came back, I take that back. She wasn't in there. She had gotten out and eventually had gotten back to her place some kind of way, but she took some things with her from the apartment. So they were able to gather their things and give them back, and eventually I told my niece that she cannot stay in that house by herself. Even though we felt like she was safe, she wasn't. And so she's now in a memory care locked unit in Ocala. Yeah. Memory care unit. They're called memory care units. They're locked units. And so sometimes they have a bracelet on or a bracelet on that when they go to the elevator will lock. They can't get out of the unit. The elevator, an alarm will sound. They have protective resources there to try to keep them from wandering, from leaving without assistance. So that's where she is now. Joe, his wife goes to see him almost every day in the facility. And she feeds him, she brings his clean clothes, and she sits down with him, and she's asked, why do you go see him? He doesn't even know who you are. She goes, but I know who he is. And he's my husband. And he would sit down with her, and so the one time I laughed because he said, does my wife know you here? And she laughed because she was his wife, but he had no clue. Hilda, she takes the same trip to church, and she's not 65 yet. She's 62. Same trip to church every Sunday, every Wednesday for Bible study. And this particular Sunday, she was gone for a couple of hours, and nobody kind of knew where she was. And here she had got lost going 2 blocks from her house, from the church to her house, which a trip that she took every week for about 20-some years or more. But she forgot her way back home. She didn't know where she was. Somebody found her wandering. I'm thinking that probably some things have been occurring, but we chalk them up to memory loss, or she's getting older, or stuff happens. Marie calls her son constantly. Somebody stole her glasses. Somebody stole her keys, her money. Somebody stole her money. Somebody came in and took food out of the refrigerator. Signs and symptoms of things changing. Nobody's taking anything from Marie. Now, sometimes there is stuff going on, so we have to figure it out. You have to go check. You have to make sure, but in her case, there was nothing really happening other than her memory she was getting to earlier stages and progressed to moderate stage dementia. Eric approaches his son. Who are you and why are you in my house? And he starts to fight him. His father deals with dementia and he doesn't know who he is. It's sad. Big Mom, I'm not taking those pills. There's 7 pills. You're trying to kill me. I don't take that many pills. My daughter doesn't give me that many pills. So they called me. This was my mom. I was on a trip at work. I said, put her on the phone. Ma, they trying to kill me. What are they doing? They're giving me 7 pills. Ma, I give you 7 pills every morning. You do? Yeah. For me, it was good. She remembered me and she trusted me. So she took them because I said it was okay for her to take them. But my other sister, she was there trying to give them to her, and she was very mean to her. And she didn't cooperate with her. But for me, she did. So it's no rhyme or reason why they know who they know, why they don't know who they know, why they know some things they know. It's just life for them. And we have to get into that life with them because that's life for them at that point. So these are all people I know. These are all people I interact with. Some are, my mom's gone. She died at 92. And the guy that didn't know his wife, he finally died. And I was friends with her and would go help her, visit her husband with her sometimes. But this is life with somebody who has Alzheimer's. What do you do? And I'm glad Jennifer told us somewhat of it. We go with the flow. We live the life that they're living. So dementia, Jennifer talked about it. It's this progressive, substantial loss of mental function, and usually doesn't happen overnight. Some of these things occur, and so we have to pay attention to them so that we can intervene or we can make some changes in their environment to keep them safe and to keep us safe. The illness varies from person to person. We talked about that. Factors, we talked about age, other conditions, and she talked about diabetes, heart conditions, sleep apnea. Education seems to be a factor. And that probably goes along with income and environment. So if you're talking about telling somebody to diet and exercise and your environment is not safe for walking in the neighborhood, your environment is a food desert. Only thing you can get is fast food in your neighborhood. What do we do? Social contacts. If you're not involved in a church or social functions or you don't have family, how do you keep your socialization going? If you don't go to the senior center, what do you do? If you don't have access to medical care, good medical care, what do you do? And you talked about 60 to 80% of dementia cases are Alzheimer's type. That's greater than 6 million people. And the other types, you talk vascular dementia, Lewy body dementia, frontotemporal dementia, mixed dementia, and others. Huntington's disease can cause some forms of dementia. Organic brain syndrome for those who were big alcohol drinkers. Parkinson's can cause some dementia. So there are other problems that need to be addressed by your medical doctor. It's not a normal process of aging, even though age is the #1 factor that determines you may have it or not. It's not normal. So the tangles that occur is abnormal. It's disease. And so the research was, how do you arrest the disease? So we have new medications to try to arrest the disease or slow it down. Women, we talked about 2 times more likely to develop dementia than men. African and Americans and Hispanics, yes. By 2060, it's predicted that the Alzheimer's cases will rise to 4 times as many for African Americans and 7 times as many for Hispanics. 14 million people.
Just in the United States.
Yes, in the United States.
Disease, so.
Yes, it is. So, short-term memory loss, subtle changes, things we can look for. Jennifer described them very, very adequately for us. And I kind of talked about some of the things that we look for. In mild stages, memory changes, mood changes, mild functional decline, moderate personal hygiene sometimes goes. And you asked a question, Mr. Green, Brother Green, about do they stay the same? Oftentimes we see a switch. So the one little lady in my church in my old church that I noticed, she started cursing. She was like the prim and proper empress and never cursed. So her children were beside themselves, embarrassed to the point, it's like, oh, Ma, something's wrong. And then they found out that she was early stage, and it progressed, and her mouth was horrible. And they were so embarrassed, but they had to know, too, that was not her. And not the her that we knew. So the pleasant little lady changed. Sometimes they get obsessed, paranoid, accusing family of stealing and leaving the house, and I'm going to do what I need to do, and they can't drive, you're taking the keys, but home modifications, throw rugs need to go. Some rooms need to, inner rooms where they can lock themselves into a room, that needs to be taken away so they can't lock themselves away from you. But they need to be able to be safe in the house, so they need to be locked in the house as we would children sometimes, with you in there, not locked in there by themselves. People do use baby monitors, nanny cams, portable commodes, urinals, incontinence, because some people do have incontinent issues, meaning not being able to go to the bathroom, or not knowing when they need to go to the bathroom. At some point, as it gets more progressive, referral to palliative care may be in order from the primary care doctor. Because, you need help with symptoms, anxiety, agitation, distress. Yes, we can talk some people down. Yes, we can do that. But when it becomes distressing, so I had a guy who his anxiety, his angst was that he was not seeing family members. He was seeing, I don't know what his history had been, but he was seeing a woman dressed in black with a knife trying to kill him. He needed medication at that point. I'm not a proponent so much of medication, but he needed medication to help him be safe and help him not be in distress, because that's distressful to see that and know that he sees that. There's nobody in the corner, but he sees that, and it's distressful to him. And so determining with the doctors, with the medical professionals, when medication might be in order. In that instance, it was in order, because that was not comfort. That was not managing his symptoms. So we need to work well with our providers. Now, we talked about self-care. We'll get to self-care for the providers, but oftentimes people don't want to put their facilities their loved ones into a facility because they've made a promise. Mom, I'm never going to put you in a nursing home. Dad, I'm never going to abandon you into a facility. I'm going to always take care of you. Well, if you can't, you can't. And the best place for them may be somewhere else. And so, a promise is a promise. However, when it gets to the point where it's not safe for you and or them, then the promise may need to be revisited. We had a person in our church recently, and her husband was her primary caregiver, and she has Alzheimer's. She just died herself. But he promised that he would never put her in a facility, and he took care of her. He also had a massive heart attack and dropped dead in the room taking care of her. So now you're in a position where you have children who need to take care of their mom. They never were able to because he took care of her totally. And so now they're in a place that they have to work. So the one tries to do it, and I'm like, you can't do this by yourself. You will burn out quickly because you've never done it, for one. I'm a medical provider, so I can do it to a point, but I can't do 24/7 care. Nobody can. So eventually she was in a facility, but she had gotten to the end stages anyway, where I went to sit with her for a couple of hours while he went and do something, and she was pretty much in a fetal position, watching TV, watching her. He kept noise on for her, but she was not. I think she knew, and she kept asking where he was. Where is he? And they kept saying going to the store. He went to the store, or he went somewhere and he came back, or they'll tell me I got to go to work, and you haven't worked in 60 years. But I got to go to work, and so you say, well, you know what, the boss called today, and you can have the day off. It's a holiday. It's Juneteenth. You don't have to go to work. Come up with something to try to distract. So we talked about averting the issue, but you can just try to distract. try to do something to get their mind. And that could be music, that could be exercise, that could be art. I've seen some people that really like the art, the coloring, the adult coloring books or some other kind. My sister loved puzzles, and every time she called me, could you please send me a puzzle and some pens? And send the pens that has Cleveland on them so I know who sent them to me. I could send them for Texas, she wouldn't. But I did. I would send her a package, every now and then with puzzles and pens to the point where she stopped doing it for some while ago to distract. But promises, we make them. I was able to keep my mom at home. I had her in adult daycare. And the one that I had, it was in Cleveland, but the one that I had, they had a doctor on site. They had therapists and everything on site, but she took her living will, the durable power of attorney to her. We took that information with her. And then one morning she fought my sons, and you don't put me on that bus. And then she told me, they called me because she wanted to talk to me. And she said, they made me get on the bus. And I said, oh, okay. Well, the next day she went. She was okay, but she had a brain bleed while she was the K. And they called me and they said, she has a DNR in place. There's a bed at hospice house. Do you want that? Or we can call 911 and take her to UH. I said, take her to hospice house. I live down the street. I'll go down there. So I went there, met them there. And they said it'll probably be maybe overnight. I don't think she'll live long, but and so we were there 2 weeks. I stayed 2 weeks with her. She never woke up. I was able to provide her care, which was great. So sometimes if there's a facility that we can get into, it helps us to be the daughter, the son, the mother, the husband, the wife. It helps us. So when you're trying to determine where's the best place for them, at home or in a facility or in a palliative care or hospice unit, at the end stages, sometimes it's best to have those people around. I did all her care. It didn't matter because I could still be daughter and do her care, but she's still in the bed. They're at that facility. I don't have to worry about dealing with other family who thought it was a problem for me not to get her into UH and get a feeding tube put in. Why? What are we gaining by that? So sometimes we need to help folks talk to their family members. That's self-care. Sometimes we need to help them talk to themselves and not beat themselves up for not being able to keep the promise that we made. So as a church, we can support others just by being there, being present, asking if there's anything we can need. Can I come sit with her while you go do what you need to do? If they'll receive us, sometimes they won't us either, but this lady, she was fine. She looked at me, she goes, who are you again? And it was hard for me too, not even being their parent, the children, because she had been a lady who used to kiss me on the cheek every time on Sunday when she was still coming to church. So she knew me well, but she didn't know me. So it was hard for me, so I know it was even harder for her sons and grandchildren. So, but be a support, help them help themselves. Be a listening ear. You may not have all the answers. And some other resources, Alzheimer's has great resources. They have hands-on caregiving training workshops. I don't think you mentioned that, but they have those as well. AARP has classes, online support. American Red Cross has some support. Elder care. The VA, if they're veterans, has support. Great supports at the VA. Church family and friends. Benjamin Rose in our area, Western Reserve area, aging. Ohio Department of Aging. Senior living facilities. Senior centers, they have talks like these sometimes from Alzheimer's and other resources come and talk. So there are resources out there. I don't know about in the islands, but I'm happy to hear that she'll be able to provide you with some information. Severe stages, severe memory loss, bedridden, you talked about, totally unable to handle your own bodily functions. So that's around-the-clock care. So the grief we talked about, you touched on it, the grief of the loved one starts before they pass. It starts when they've lost who they are or lost the relationship that you had. So that loss of relationship, the grieving starts. And so how can we support through that? We come to these decisions, home versus placement. Do they need to be in a facility? Can they be safe at home? Do you have help? Again, one person cannot do it. If there are other people that say they'll do it, I'll be there for you. For my mom, they said, whatever you need, call me. Well, I made a few phone calls, but they weren't able. And I get it. Everybody they're living their lives. They're working. They have kids. They have other things that they need to do. But I would say don't make the offer if you're not able to follow through on it, because you're developing a plan on what these people say they're going to do to help you. And then when your plan falls through and it's just you, that's a setup for burnout. It's a setup for failure. So plan with family if you have family. Plan with church family if church family is willing and able to help. Assisted living is no longer an option when they're in this moderate, even moderate to severe stage of dementia. Because in those assisted living facilities, that's an assist. So they have to be able to do some things on their own. And if they're wanderers or if they're not able to remember to bathe or even remember to eat, then assisted living is not the place. There are memory care units, as I stated before, and those are locked units, and nursing homes. Make sure or try, at the beginning stages, and I should have maybe put this earlier in the talk, I got down here living will and doable power of attorney for health care. After they get to moderate, even mild, but moderate, you can't do these forms, living wills and doable power, because they're not in their right mind. And so the earlier you can get these kinds of things in place is helpful. I had a church member who went into the hospital last week. She's 86. She doesn't have dementia, I don't think she has dementia. However, she had a medical condition. Her son lives in Arizona. She doesn't have living will or durable power of attorney. He doesn't have it. And the people that are here, she has a niece and a friend. The niece took her to the hospital. The niece can't answer for her. The niece can't make decisions for her. She's able to make her own decisions now, but they thought about that, and so now they're working on durable power of attorney for health care and living will now, because the writing is on the wall. So I say that to say, when we begin to see these memory issues coming up that seem like they might not be anything, you might want to get in place, who's going to answer for me when I can't answer for myself? And for myself, I did mine. My children were upset because I said I don't want to be kept alive on any machines or anything. The youngest one, who I put in charge, said, "Why are you angry with mom for making decisions for herself?" Those are her decisions. And so if you haven't made them for yourself, I would suggest that you do. If you're taking care of loved ones who are still able to make some decisions for themselves, I would suggest that you get living wills and durable power of attorneys for health care in place. You can get the forms online or at any medical facility. They ask you now when you go to the doctor, do you have one? And if you don't, they'll give you one. They'll have a social worker that'll talk to you about it. You can pull it offline also. The Ohio one, since we are in Ohio, it's online. The Ohio, it's a form of, not a special form, it's the form that they all use. So that's another thought to keep in mind. And agitation, don't get angry. They can't help it. Talked about it. Try not to. It's easier for me to say it than for you when you're in the heat of the moment. Distraction, talk about art, projects. In the hospital, we used to put the wheelchair right in the front, and we used to use, everything's electronic now, of course. They say it's paperless, but I've seen more paper come off those machines through the paperless system than it was before we got paperless. But we used to tear off labels, and we would put patient labels on everything, so we used to sit the people that had somewhat of a, agitation problem at the front, and they would tear off the labels for us, and they were so happy to be able to work on a project and be helpful. When you can, that's more mild to moderate. But, find a project and help them think that they're helping you, because that helps to distract some, not all, because like we said, one person is one person. But those are some ideas. Exercise as a group, you know, line dancing as a group, music. You talked about your mom and the hymns. I've gone to in so many people. And when I worked at the VA, and I used to sing with patients, and so it would bring out some things that you thought they didn't have in them. You know, like those songs, the old song, and they knew all the words, all the verses. We don't like to sing all the verses. They know all the verses, and they will sing them. And so whatever you can find to tap into, do that. Don't argue. That's the worst thing we can do. And word puzzles, I talked about, coloring books, adult daycare, keeps them active. If that's if it's in your finances, because those things are costly. Sometimes insurance, you know, some insurances pay a minimal amount. Some organizations have they have something set up for less than the normal fee. So just to kind of get out there, work with if you're in a facility, trying to work with the social workers in that facility. Usually a geriatric practice. Doctors are older, that's like myself. They have a group in the group. They have psychologists in the group. They may have physical therapists in the group. They may have a nutritionist in the group, and a social worker. Social worker is your friend, most of them. They'll be able to help with resources in your community, because I can talk about resources in my community, they may not be in your community. So your social worker is your friend in your doctor's practice. Again, if it's a geriatric practice, they usually have all those services, or some of them, or know how to tap into them, a relationship with those services if they're not in the actual practice. And driving, you know, before you take the keys, they have driving simulated to see if they're safe to drive, and then they can help you take the keys, because sometimes it's a battle to get those keys. And so if you can get the support of your doctor, because you know in that era, they have a whole lot of respect for the doctor still. What the doctor says is gospel. What your daughter says, or that they don't know what they're talking about, but what the doctor says is gospel. So if you can get the medical folks to help you get those keys, get those keys. I had a friend of my mom. He was 90-something. He had 2 or 3 accidents and still was not willing to give up those keys. But the doctor, told him, I think it's time. And he was, okay, doctor. Man, you don't know what a fight we had to get those keys. So the doctor, they can be your friend, the medical doctors. Touching people. Sometimes the agitation comes, and I know we need to get done what we need to get done. But Miss Bixby, I'm about to help you change your clothes if that's okay. I'm Marty, I'm your nurse, I'm about to help you. Or I'm your caregiver for today. Can I help? I want to help you change your clothes, if that's okay. And sometimes that's a different interaction than, because I got to go do something else. And so approach is sometimes good to help with the agitation. Explain. Even though they don't understand who you are and sometimes don't understand what's going on, you'd be surprised. Just the communication, and the sincerity and the soft touch and the voice, calm voice, bring it down a couple of notches. Respect privacy. Because I fight you too if you're trying to lift my clothes and we in the middle of people. And I know that that's not the ladylike thing to do. We're going to fight. So pay attention to what's happening, how you would want it to be done. And sometimes that helps a whole lot with the agitation and the aggression. I'm not saying that's 100% what it is, but sometimes I've seen it. That's some of what it could be. And let's see, what else I got here? So try to keep a routine of providing care. And for some that they know, Jennifer spoke about it. It's irritating to know that I'm losing my memory. So sometimes you can put little notes around. It may seem childish, it may seem, but you know how the little kids had a little cubby and you know, this goes here and that goes there. And you may want to use labels. Like that's a clock. And I know they do it sometimes on some of the memory figures. That's a clock. It's your phone. These are your tissue. You know, just kind of label some things. And it kind of helps sometimes if they're able to still, in that mild area, mild to moderate. So those are some things that kind of help as well. It's clear, basic, step-by-step instruction. You know, Galatians 6 and 9 say, let us not be weary in well-doing. So it's well-doing. Let us try not to get weary, but let us try to think of tips and little things that could help us, you know, help our people, our young people, our older people, our young older people. I think I'm almost done because I think we kind of losing steam here. I'm good. It's lunchtime. Oh, really? Cooking. That was a thing for my mom. That she burnt toast in the microwave. Okay, so no more cooking. What you can do sometimes, if they still with it to a degree, put an out of order sign on your microwave. Tell them it don't work. Unplug it or something. It's not working anymore. To keep them from, you know, from cooking. Then we talk about healthy diets, adaptive equipment. Sometimes they have to have special utensils to eat with. Do not force feed. We get concerned as they get more moderate to severe. The appetite does go. And so if you think of a car in a garage and you ain't going nowhere, and it already has gas in it, how much more gas can you put in it? You ain't driving. You ain't got nothing to burn. You're not burning it. So sometimes as they're slowing down, the functions are slowing down, they don't have need to eat. Drink water, yes. Sometimes sips, people live a long time on sips and bites. Long time. I saw a guy that he was almost comatose, and he would wake up every now and then. His wife, I want pizza. His wife would go get a whole pizza. He might eat a bite. That's it. Go back to sleep for 2 or 3 days. Wake up. He want a burger. She get him a burger, one bite, and a sip of milkshake. That's it. And he lived weeks, not months. So we're not allowing them to die. We're not killing them. We don't give them food all the time. And then choices, you know, pleasure eating. To a point where you know, let me eat what I want to eat. Don't tell me I need. At that point, when it's gotten to moderate to severe, we're past the point where diet is going. I think at that point, if they want you know, a piece of something sweet, I get it. Because it's like it's getting closer to the end of this journey. So unpredictable behaviors, you can't always determine them, but kind of try to figure them out. Try to avoid a lot of the loud noise and distraction sometimes, and bright lights, all that sometimes causes more aggravation to a point. Go for a walk sometimes. I like you right in there. I had Psalm 46 and 10. I had Isaiah 26 and 3. He will keep you in perfect peace. So those that are saved, you know, sometimes you can tap into scripture. Tap into what they know. Do a Sunday school lesson with them. Let them do it. Reassure them. Reminisce old times, you know. Remember, check out the picture book. Let's go through this book. My sister loves you. She'll pick them. She send me some pictures. So we'll go through some pictures. Try to identify triggers that might trigger the agitation and kind of try to avoid those if possible. Try to avoid open-ended questions where they get, you know, it gets confusing. You know, have you eaten? Yes, no. You try to, you know, I know when we're trying to be conversationalists, we say avoid yes, no questions. But on this end, we back over here. Maybe yes, no questions is kind of what we can do. It's all we can deal with when we're confused. Be patient. Be still and know that I am God. Adopt to their communication methods. If it's words or tone or body language or gestures. I went to see Inside Out 2. Took my granddaughter. But I had to see Inside Out 1 before that, so she pulled it up on Netflix or whatever. So we saw 1. And then we saw 2. But I thought about that, those emotions. They're in there. And so even though we can't put it together, they can't put it together, the emotions are in there. And so, kind of figure out what's going, the girl snapped at her parents, but in fact, she just couldn't get it together. And so think about it, a lot of people that have Alzheimer's or dementia have been, professors and doctors and social workers and dietitians and nurses. And so, it's in there still to some degree. And so how can we tap into that and help us to help them to not be so frustrated? Because in some point of reality, you know that you're not yourself. And so try to adapt to what's going on. And sometimes when they're squirming or whatever, they got to use the bathroom. Think about when you squirming and can't, you got to use the bathroom. It could be something as simple as that. I'm not trying to fight you or anything. I got to pee. Oh, excuse me. I'm sorry. Lord, forgive me.
Reverend Molly, have you ever seen the movie, that long plane ride to Europe? I saw 3 or 4 movies. One was called Still Alice. Have you ever seen that one where the woman she's in her early 50s, I think, and she was just diagnosed with Alzheimer's. So it walks through the whole acceptance and her accepting the process too. Because she had to accept it. And then convince her husband and her kids that this isn't just an aging that I just forgot my keys.
It's hard.
Yes, and it's hard. So that was a good movie. I forget the name of the
I'll look for
actress,
that.
but it was called Still Alice.
I got to look for that. Now I got to go see Moana, I think, whenever it comes out.
Yes.
Oh, okay. Oh, wow. I got to look for that. But,
Still Alice.
Still
'Cause
Alice.
It gives you a whole perspective
Yeah.
from their point.
Yeah.
That they're grieving
I mean,
all these losses, because she was a linguistic professor,
oh, wow.
and she lost the ability to speak, and had such issues with her youngest daughter, I think, who ended up taking care of her,
Yeah,
because she, they bonded over,
yeah.
just reading simple passages or reading, and, where her husband failed her, I think.
Oh, yeah. So as we wind this up, self-care. Self-care is essential. You got to put your mask on first, your oxygen mask, as in the airplane. Be honest with yourself and know your limits and your boundaries, and set your boundaries. Professional help, support groups, take your own spa days, go for your own walk, read, crochet, sew, cook, music, comedy, whatever you need for yourself. Because you can't provide care to that person that you love because you burned out. You wore out. I mean, you don't have nothing left. You're not sleeping. You ain't half eating. You're not, I love walking. But if I gotta, I can't walk, you got to take care of yourself. And so that's essential. The one thing I wanted to say, my sister had a list of phone numbers. So the reason why my sister she would call, I guess, down that list. And she must go back up to the top of the list or whatever. But they had emergency. So that's one thing that the people that are still able to use the phone or whatever, they have a list for them to be able to make some social contact if they're not there with them. Handrails on the stairwells, again, remove locks from interior doors. Emergency alert buttons may be okay for some in the mild stages, they're still able to understand and how to use that.
If they'll wear it.
If they'll wear it.
That's half the issue.
And not, some people are oral, so people have eaten, swallowed their names and stuff. So depending on how big it is, it's a concern. So again, you have to know who you're dealing with. Smoke detectors, CO2 detectors, put away sharps and tools. A pair of scissors and those kinds of things may not be the best thing to have around sometimes, because you don't know what's in the thought process. So when my heart is overwhelmed, lead me to the rock that is higher than I. Prayer still works. Prayer still works. Get a good, get a prayer partner. If you haven't, not just even taking care of somebody with dementia, but if you didn't have anybody before, you definitely need somebody now to tap into to pour into you, to sound off, just to be able to scream at if need be. But we need to go to the rock, and the rock kind of leads and guides us to who and what and where we need to be and where that person needs to be safely. So that's what I got. Questions, comments, concerns? Thank you, Jennifer. You made it very easy.
So I do have a question. So as a church, and because I know that you mentioned that you had your members or in your congregation that you have worked with, what can we do better as a church as far as support and then also being able to still have our members who might be going through this to be able to worship?
I think what you're doing now is a great start, is providing the information to the congregation. And then the people who have need be open enough to, we wear good masks. We wear good masks in church. We wore masks before 2020, right? I'm here sitting here, praise the Lord. How you doing? Oh, I'm blessed and highly favored. And you're going through. And so how am I know that you need help? If you just told me you're blessed and highly favored, you're smiling, I don't know you need my help. So we have to be open and honest and be willing to ask for help when we need it. And then on the other end, if you say you're going to help. They had called me because they knew since I retired, I was taking care of this doctor, and he passed. Him and his wife, she passed, and then he passed. So they know I didn't have that case anymore. So they were saying, well, we know you was doing that. Could you help? Could you give us some resource, anybody you know that might be willing to come and sit with her? And I told them a few people that I knew, because I'm not going to give you somebody that I don't trust, or I don't, I've come behind them, so I know what their work is like. So I'm not going to give you that person's name. But I gave them some names, but I told them, I'd be willing to, I can't do it as a routine, because I get too much else going on. But I can, if you need to go do something for hours, let me know. I can I'll come and do it. So I did it once, and then I was scheduled to do it again, but by that time she had gotten to the point where they had to put her in a facility. But you have to let people, so they called me. So you got to let people know. And then if they can help you, they can. If they can't, they can't. But at least you've put it out there. So let's not be too, we want our business to be our business, but if we need help, pray about it. Ask God to show you who to go. A lady just called me recently and said, the Lord showed me you. I'm like, really? What was I doing? So, but she was going to have surgery. She has ostomy, and she has a wound. And she said, he sent me you, told me to call you. So she called me one morning. She said, just as a resource. I said, okay, fine. So I knew when she got out of the hospital, they probably would give her resources and stuff. Well, she called me the other morning at 6 a.m. She said, I've been up since 3, and this thing keeps leaking, and I don't know what to do. I've done everything that they told me to do. I said, oh, I wish I could have went to your instruction when you got them, because I haven't done, I've done them. I haven't done them in a while. But, it's like riding a bike. So I said, I'll be over there. I said, I just brought the dog in the house. I walk him about 5 o'clock, 5 to 6, or 5:30 to 6:30. He big, 115 pounds, so I try not to walk him when everybody else is out. So I walk him earlier. So she knew I'd get up early. So she said, I know you were up. I'm like, yeah, I'm just walking back in the house with the dog. So let me get ready, and I'll come over to your house. And I went over, and I helped her, and I called her back that night. I said, this thing, she goes, man, it's on here. It's on here. She goes, it ain't moving. It's good. And and then I called her a few days later. She said, it's still on here. So then she called me, when should I be changing it? So I went over yesterday and did it, the whole thing. We went through the whole thing, and had her help me so she could get hands-on. She knows, because eventually you have to do this yourself. But she's nervous, and her husband's sick, and so. But people, if you're open and you do what you say you're gonna do and say, when you say you're gonna do it and say it, people will call you, but be willing to. If you can't do it, let them know you can't do it, and then. But we have to be open to ask for help when we need help. But also these things like this is great, because it gets the information out there, all the information. It's good.
For those patients that usually give up their kids, I have a cousin here, her husband has Alzheimer's, and she's been allowing him to drive. I
So be on the lookout. If you see him, it's like, oh.
Some people end up in another city, another state, driving.
Yeah.
And you can tag ACE, I think it's ACE, numbers into their phone where if they're, Larry C. McMiller got lost and, he had handed his phone to a deputy sheriff. And so his daughter had already put like ACE be the first number in the phone.
Oh.
So that he knew who to call. He obviously knew this man was lost. And so that's who he, you know, he was able to find his way. Call someone. Okay. But thank you. Thank you again. Do you have any remarks, Reverend, or anything you wanted to say? No, this has just been, thank you, Sister Beverly, for just getting this together. This was so needed. So you wanted to tell Darlene, and that way we're all educated on the same level to where we can do that. So that was my goal. Well, you definitely helped me as well. So not just sister, and I'm pretty sure you helped others who were watching. So I appreciate it. Thank you. And thank Jennifer too for coming. Thank you for stay after. I look forward to working with her. I guess I need to observe one class or something. Oh, we can call it that? Okay. I did go and observe Jay Regales, the person over in Wayne County. He did a session too, and that was well informative too. Get off the clock. Congratulations. So if you want anything, we have some soup and sandwiches downstairs, cookies, and even we can make it to go if you don't want to stay. You know, I have to go quick prayer over the food. So, we do a quick prayer over the food. Oh, quick prayer over the food. Dear Heavenly Father, we thank you for the blessings that we've received today, and we thank you for the hands who prepared the food downstairs and for the fulfillment of our bodies in Christ's name. Amen. Stuffed pepper. Stuffed pepper soup. It's got rice and yummy. And we've got turkey sliders. We have turkey sliders and cookies. Baked turkey. We can bring something up to you.
Yeah, so you want to go downstairs? Do you want me to get you to go?
I'll be okay.
Sure. Our turkey sliders are good. They cheesy and mayonnaise-y. She's terrible.
And it's money. Thank you so much.
Okay. Let's see. All right. Did the zip go sideways?
Uh-oh, go ahead.
You got
Go
it?
ahead. Yeah.
It does.
Thank you.
She's gonna go.
Okay, thank you.